Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 81.
Ben, something very, very important happened in 1981 in the United States.
Okay. I was 4 years old at the time, so I'm probably not going to remember.
You were alive. Well, yeah, of course you were alive when this happened. You're so old. How was the transition to color?
What happened in 1981, Josh?
So in 1981, this is a huge blow for feminism. The feminist movement in our country is that Sandra Day O'Connor became the first woman to be nominated and then appointed to the Supreme Court.
Awesome. What a momentous occasion.
She's from Arizona, I'll have you know, and there are so many schools named Sandra Day O'Connor Elementary, Middle, and High School in this state. It's crazy.
How do you know if someone's from Arizona?
Because like half the schools are.
Oh, they'll tell you.
Oh, they'll tell you. She's from Arizona, by the way.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Well, is she still around?
She is not. Unfortunately, she died back in 2006 after having served on the Supreme Court for public math 25 years.
Awesome. Good job. You should be an accountant.
Oh, wait a minute. She didn't die in 2006. I think she died in 2009.
That's when she left the Supreme Court.
That's when she left the Supreme Court, 2006.
Yeah.
Oh, man. You see, this is what happens when you're looking at the wrong dates in Wikipedia.
Yeah, be careful. All right, Josh, there's something we need to follow up on. But, okay, first things first. What happened in your life today?
It's almost like you have some kind of insight into what I do.
This is a monumentous occasion, or monumental, whatever the right word is. Tell me about it.
Well, it's either monumental or a nothing burger because
momentous.
I don't know yet.
I mixed those two up.
Monumental works too, I think. So today, Ben, I took the last of 4 of CPA exams.
Certified Public Accountant.
Yes. So to become a certified public accountant, you have to have a master's degree or equivalent in accountancy. You have to have worked as an accountant for at least 1 full calendar year, either under a CPA or somebody with requisite experience.
Check.
And then you have to pass 4 exams, like standardized tests that are created by the AICPA, the American Institute for Certified Public Accountants.
Okay, so you took the final of the 4 exams today. When will you know your results?
I won't know the results until October 11th, 2022, for all you future listeners.
Wow. All right, so we got a month, basically.
So here's the really fun part about this, Ben. So when you have 4 tests that you have to pass, right? But when you pass the first one, it starts a clock where you have to pass the other 3 for them all to count.
Oh.
And so when I passed the first one a while back, that was a while back. And so that credit will expire about basically Thanksgiving this year.
Okay, so if you find out on the 11th of October that you failed it, you just have a month to study and retake.
Yes, basically. But I've got all the studying done for this, so I'd probably schedule it to retake in like as soon as humanly possible. And this is one of those things that you can't just like go to a random place and have somebody watch you take this test. Like they're administered by actual test. Like if nobody's ever taken like a standardized test as an adult, you have to go to a special building that their whole
it's
business
proctored and monitored. There needs to be integrity surrounding this so that people can trust the institution.
Yes, and I think there are 4 offices in the state of Arizona. And so if I do fail the test and I have to take another one very, very quickly, it is quite possible that I would have to travel to another state in order to find an open slot.
Josh, anyone that's listened to this podcast knows, as I know, you didn't fail the test. You were ready, you studied, you did the preparation you needed, you saved the easiest one for last. You got this, man. You did it.
You know how I approach the universe, Ben.
I know you're a pessimist. Just you set yourself up for success here. It's going to be okay.
Well, as soon as I get the go-ahead or whatever, hopefully on October 11th, then I've got to send some paperwork in to the state accountancy board and do some, I guess it's all boilerplate after that. And then hopefully that'll be the end of this, the culmination of my 4-year journey.
Did they send you like a swell certificate?
Oh, of course. You know how professional certifications are in the civilian world. I'll get a big 20-pound piece of paper. With like nice. A big embossed
that you can hang on the wall.
Yes, and point at and be like, see, that's why you're coming in here and listening to me when I tell you that you screwed everything up.
So what are some other equivalents of this? Like, is that the same as say like passing the bar for a lawyer?
I'm not going to put it that high, just because being a lawyer requires so much more Well, I say that, but I mean,
It feels about the same.
If I don't know, I feel like a law degree is probably harder than a degree in accounting, or maybe it's just a different part of your brain. There's the talky part of your brain, and there's the math part of your brain. I'm good with the math part.
Okay.
So anyway, Ben, there's one thing I have to say about
a preliminary and tentative congratulations. Let's hear your one thing.
All right, my one thing is that my brain is mush because I sat in a silent room for 4 hours and racked every brain cell of it. And so, listeners, I apologize if it feels like I'm not as witty as normal. That's because I'm just kind of pouring out whatever leftovers are in my brain.
Or they'll find out that when you're barely pouring out the leftovers of the mush in your head, you're still pretty witty. How's your yard coming along?
So the yard is finished with a big asterisk next to it because it's done. Like the person that was doing it finished, but it's bad. Like they didn't do a good job. There's a bunch of cut corners that I can point out, but it's along with all the other things, it's good enough for now.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that we would like to have redone maybe sometime in the future if we ever have the spare capital lying around.
Yeah. I want you to dig on that for a sec because I have a story that happened to me this weekend. I want to see if you have the same thoughts as I do on this. What do you mean, like, good enough for now? Like, talk about your decision not to pursue it any further.
So, like, listeners of the podcast have heard, I had a couple of rants about this company already. Like, they tried to gyp me or try to actively, like, defraud me a couple of times out of a ton of money. Like, lie to me and try to, like...
You're probably following along with the history of your friction with this landscaping company you hired to do your backyard.
So it was this battle internal to myself because this took 2 full months from like start to finish.
And how long was it supposed to take?
It was supposed to take like 2 weeks.
Right.
And so there's this constant battle inside of me to like, I need to call and fight this guy or else it's just going to fall out this way and it's going to suck, against this part of my brain that's like, just forget it. Just stop fighting it. Just let it be done. And then we won't have to deal with this person anymore.
Right.
Like the time that he said, oh, yeah, we'll take out the tree and grass over it. And then, like, cut the tree.
They paved around the tree.
Left the stump, and then we're going to just put the grass around it. And then
your kids were going to go out there and play soccer and not fall over and kill themselves on that stump.
And then the worst part is, like, I called him, like, hey, your guys left the stumps. Like, oh, that's not right. And then he calls his guys and then calls me back like 10 minutes later. He goes, oh, they sent me a picture. It actually looks okay. You should probably leave it like that. Like, I paid you to take out the tree, and we talked about this. Like, I don't know if we talked about, like, we talked about this. Stop trying to gaslight me about what I told you about my yard. That was the thing, man. There's so much gaslighting from this freaking landscaper.
I don't think it's unique to him, and that's why I wanted to talk to this point. So I'll tell you what happened to me this week. It was a very, very routine thing. You know, like going to the Circle K on a military installation is called a shopette. So I went to the shopette before work in the morning. I got some gas from my car, and I went inside, and I think I got an energy drink and a snack or something like that, and I was in the checkout. And they were kind of short-handed on the cashiers, so the line was kind of long. So I get up, it's my turn, the guy checks me out. I pay cash because I want to break up a 20 so that I have smaller bills in my wallet, and he gives me back my change. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but we've reduced our consumption of paper recently, so we've stopped handing people receipts. So he asked me if I want a receipt. I say no. He hands me my stuff and the change, and I kind of step away so that the next person can come up, and I get out of the way. And as I'm walking out towards the door, I look down at my hand, and it's obviously the wrong amount of change.
Like how off? Like you bought an energy drink and like a candy bar, so you're expecting what, $15 back?
Yeah. Well, I think I may have just bought an energy drink, so I expected that to cost $3, and I had $15 and like 20 cents change in my hand, and I know it wasn't a $4.50 energy drink.
Ben, tell me you didn't go back in there and stand back in that line for $1. So.
That is exactly the calculus that I made. Is this worth $1 to me? and because I didn't have a receipt, it wasn't going to be easy.
Right.
That's how you weigh the cost of it. Like if I could just go back in and go, oh yeah, you're right. Or if he could hit a button on his register and it would show him how much more he had too much money. Or I don't know. It just wasn't worth the fight. Like you decided with the landscaper. Like, yeah, is this right? No, it's not right. Is it worth it to try to fix it? No, that's not it either.
Oh, so what did you do? Just like
Nothing.
let it go?
I just
Let
it
the
go.
universe eat your dollar?
I always think of these things in terms of a pure economic trade-off. I paid $1 to not have that argument with that employee that morning. And that was worth it. That was $1 well spent.
Not to have to go deal with him again. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not worth it. Now, one thing that I haven't said, and I haven't done yet, but I'm going to do this week. I am going to turn my landscaper into the Arizona Corporation Commission.
Yeah, you already mentioned you're going to do this, and that sounds like a good use of your time.
Yes, and it's been like a month now.
Other people need to know about this. This is a good you can do for society. Whether you think of it as revenge or you really are just doing something from a utilitarian point of view for the goodness of the common. But
this is like 80% spite is what this is. I waited a full month because I don't want him to track it back to me.
Okay, I have a question for you. How long did you run a pool business where you cared for people's pools?
I had that business for 5 years, I believe.
Okay, so in that 5 years, did anyone turn you into the Arizona, whatever, Chamber of Commerce or whatever it is?
The Corporation Commission, and one person threatened to do that. And then I told him to get bent because he had no proof that I did anything to be breaking their rules, even though I obviously was at every turn. But he didn't know that.
Okay, so turning people into like this group is kind of the old way of doing it. The new way of doing this is going on Google or Yelp and giving somebody a bad review. And then there's it's low overhead, it's easy to do, no one's going to make them prove anything. They can just go on and give you 1 star and say crap about you.
This guy knows where I live, and I question his mental stability. So,
so you want the protection that comes through having a third party that anonymizes you?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going for.
Okay. All right, then. Carry on. Well done. I would do the same for different reasons. So you put a placeholder in here last time, almost immediately after our discussion. I could tell that something must have not sit right with you after our discussion last time, where I talked about how I had missed... I'd taken a game loss in a Magic tournament because I trusted my digital device, and I told you that we are approaching the point where we will no longer be accountable for our own actions because of our devices, and that didn't sit well with you. So what do you got to say that we didn't discuss last time?
Well, what sat worse with me is then afterward, I, off the top of my head, came up with a scenario where a self-driving car hits a kid. Who's responsible? Is it the person that was sitting in the car, or is it the car's fault? Whose responsibility is that?
You're talking the degree of self-driving car where the driver doesn't even have a steering wheel.
Yes, where we're talking years in the future, where the front seats of the car face the back seats of the car, so it's like a little living room that's driving around.
So you're just in there, and then the car hits a kid.
Yes, and I don't know. This just sparked this discussion in my mind, and it's rattled around, and I don't think I really landed very well in anything, because on the one hand, I have this concept that we need to be responsible. We need to be able to hold somebody responsible for things that happen. Our entire legal system is built on the idea that I think you've mentioned this specific phrase, and I love it so much. When we have this whole giant bureaucratic process to reconcile and to make things right, when two strangers bump into each other out in the world in a way that incurs damage.
Yeah.
But how does that accountability, how does that responsibility, and how does that bureaucratic process deal with a world that has ever decreasing responsibility placed on a person and ever increasing responsibility placed on a faceless, almost untouchable legally third party?
Yeah. Okay, there was a sitcom back in the 90s, I think, called Dinosaur. It was satirical in the same way that WALL-E is, where there was this big faceless company. In WALL-E, it was called By and Large.
By and Large.
In Dinosaur, it was called We Say So. They had ads on TV. We're like, why are you buying this? We say so. I don't think that it would... The idea that we'll put sufficient trust in a self-driving car and it's also capable of killing a child really seems unlikely to me. But for the sake of this trolley problem, let's say it happens. I think the person inside of the car is irrelevant.
Okay. But then how does the system deal with making it right?
They're just a consumer of the service. They're no more at fault than a person that's on a train that hits and kills someone that's just a passenger. They just bought a service of transportation.
Right now, though, like if you get a service of a ride service, like if you jump in an Uber or a taxi and the Uber or the taxi driver hits somebody,
right?
There's still a human driver. There is blame. Like you are at fault.
Good. So let's say we abstract the driver of the Uber away as like a managed service that you're consuming. Let's say they're a robot. Is the person that paid for the robot the one at fault?
I get that, but I'm worried that we're approaching this like, oh, sorry, your child is dead. Take it up with this giant megacorp that can bury you in legal paperwork for the next 20 years if they feel like it.
Yeah, we kind of do that already. I mean, like if let's say you had, I don't know, a baby spoon that would break off right below the thing and you put it in a baby's mouth, it breaks off and they choke to death and die. You know, you don't blame the mom that was holding the spoon. You go to the corporation that produced the thing.
I can see what you're saying, and we could throw anecdotes and straw men at each other all day to try to prove this. But I mean, there are arguments to be had about the lesser stakes. Like, for example, your app was so good that you stopped like paying attention,
right?
And then you were the one that suffered the consequences,
and I was the one that was held accountable.
So, is that a direction that we want to go? Do we want to actually give up the responsibility to these devices? Like, are you? Because I always go to the malicious place. Somebody that's trying to do this maliciously, like the next Magic tournament you go to and he's 30 minutes late, oh, I didn't get the notification. Is there any way to verify that? Can we check his phone?
So this is a good question. I think they asked it really good in science fiction. Have you been watching the Amazon Prime series Upload?
I've watched the first season, but I have not caught up on the second season.
Okay, so spoiler alert for Upload. In the first season, we have a person that dies in an accident in a self-driving car. Or gets injured in a self-driving car to the point where he's approaching death, and they decide to conduct this process that uploads his consciousness into a computer but destroys him in the physical world.
Yes, he is super dead now.
So, but now a computer version of him that has his same memories and knowledge and personality exists inside of a database. And then one of the plot elements that they didn't resolve in the first season is that there's the potential that his accident that injured him had some type of external nefarious influence.
Yeah, somebody might have tampered with his car that caused him to get in the accident in the first place.
Yes. That's the kind of possibility that exists in a system where we've taken away individual responsibility for those kinds of things.
And that goes back to, I hate to keep using this, but like, okay, self-driving car hits my kid. Don't take it up with me. Take it up with the megacorp. Go to the megacorp. Oh, sorry. Like, we checked the software in the car and it's, 6 months out of date, or somebody tampered with it, or somebody uploaded a virus, or this was a known bug that we hadn't fixed at the time. Like, there are so many ways around this to like keep moving the finger of responsibility and authority. That's what I'm really afraid of. I'm afraid that somebody's going to say, I need to point at who's at fault here. And everyone in the room is just going to start pointing at each other, and you're not going to be able to actually stick it to anybody.
So you've identified the stress point of the adoption of these kinds of leaps forward. And I feel like at that inflection point, you can either do two things. You can say, all right, we've realized that this risk that we're accepting in taking this step forward is too much, and we're going to stop it and reverse it. Or we're going to accept it and find a way to compensate for it and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, just because we can't come up with the solution right here doesn't mean that solution doesn't exist, and doesn't mean that legal structure will be put into place. The first kid that is hit by a self-driving car will create so many new legislative processes. It'll be insane. Right. I get all that.
So either then self-driving cars will stop working until they fix them enough to where they never, ever, ever kill a kid, or there's just, I don't know, insurance or a way to compensate people, and we just accept that as a risk.
Do you know what I hate about my own example that I used last episode that we're still talking about?
Yes.
Is I'm actually a huge proponent of self-driving cars.
Me too.
Like, to the point where even if they do kill kids, my first question is going to be like, yeah, but how many kids do human drivers kill a year?
It's a good question. I think it's the right question.
Yeah, this is everybody's, like, and you've been talking.
If we take the humans out of the equation and reduce it by a factor of 40,000, are we willing to accept the risk that faceless machine that we can't point to a clear perpetrator being such a problem to deal with is better than the loss of life we take that's a bunch of individual decisions by imperfect humans?
And that's my problem, is there's going to be so many people on the opposite side of self-driving cars in the auto industry. Like, there's so much vested interest in not having self-driving cars that they're going to fight until, like, oh, we can't have self-driving cars until they're perfect. When the argument needs to be, we can't have self-driving cars until they're slightly better than people.
I wonder how much is enough.
From the economic...
Slightly doesn't feel right. I'd say maybe twice as good as people.
Nope. Because from an economic utility standpoint, any improvement over human drivers is an improvement that we should jump on.
No, I don't think you're right. So let's say it is 40,000. Let's say in the United States alone, every year 40,000 children die by getting hit by drivers. Drunk drivers, careless drivers, distracted drivers, malfunctioning cars, whatever it is, 40,000 kids. Let's say now we can invent a car and put it on the street today that only kills 38,000 kids a year. There's no way in any universe where that flies.
That's why. Does that number have to be 0 when it's better than what's currently happening? What you're doing is you're holding two options. One has less death for children, and you're discarding it.
Yeah, but this gets into that space, that weird economic space that we're not comfortable with. Like, do we kill someone and harvest their organs to save 5 people on the donor registry?
We're not active.
You're just talking about pure utility, economic life cost. Because and there's more at stake here. It's about putting our trust in a technology, and it does have to be, I think, an order of magnitude. I think it needs to be 10 times. I think if it's 40,000 kids that die a year, it needs to be 4,000 or less.
This blows my mind that you, Ben Rich, want to have like such a robust self-driving car system when you have 6 children in your household, and they've like 2 of the 3 that can drive have demonstrated absolutely horrible skills of like being behind a wheel of a car. You should be the biggest proponent of this.
Yeah, this is humans and risk. We're going to talk about this later with the United States Air Force. All right, Josh, I got a question for you.
Okay, Ben, I've got answers for you.
Okay, do you have any hobbies that you have a crush on?
Do I have hobbies that I have a crush on?
Yeah.
Like hobbies. All right, so do I have a hobby that I do that I just love so much that like I'm embarrassed by it? Or do I have
crushes about something you don't have yet?
Oh, are there hobbies that I want to do desperately that I haven't because my wife would divorce me? Okay, so the very first one that comes to mind. Oh no, now another one came to mind. Okay, no. We're going to start with realistic and then I'll go with the stupid one.
Okay.
Realistically, I have always had a fascination with perpetual moving rolling ball sculptures. They're those little things you set on your desk that, you know, like it's got a little motor and it raises a metal marble to a certain height and then it runs a little track and like circles back and forth and then settles back down the bottom. And I have watched so many YouTube tutorials about how, just go get some galvanized wire and a soldering kit and go to town and do it all yourself. And like, Ben, I want to do that so bad.
Okay, that was a really good answer. What's stopping you? Because that didn't sound that expensive.
Mostly right now it's the time thing, and that I have, I've had one night stands with too many other hobbies that I have stuff in the house.
Good. You're way ahead of me. So, Josh, what was your first hobby?
What was my first hobby?
Yeah. What did you lose your hobby virginity to?
Oh gosh, I don't know if we want to phrase it that way. This the earliest thing that I can remember doing is probably rollerblading.
Ooh, rollerblading, nice. Was it all you hoped it would be?
Ben, I was 8 or 9 years old, living in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, and we had a patio that was maybe 10 feet wide and like 50 feet long, and that was it. And
I lived at the end of a dirt road when I got my first pair of rollerblades.
That's awesome.
I got my rollerblades on Christmas Day 1991, and we had no pavement whatsoever. So my sisters and I drove down to the local outdoor strip mall that was deserted because it was Christmas Day, and we were rollerblading around when we must have tripped some kind of motion alert, and the security guard showed up on Christmas Day and told us we couldn't rollerblade there.
Oh, what a jerk. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Told a bunch of kids that they can't rollerblade.
The Grinch who stole freaking Christmas.
Well, I mean, I guess he was mad because he had to get up and come yell at y'all, but still, come on.
All right. I want to keep going down this line of questioning. Have you ever done something you regret with a hobby?
Ooh, Warhammer 40K. I'm looking at you. Like, that was so much money poured into it, and like early in my gaming career. And Ben, I'll tell you what, like I made so many models and put so many hours into painting them, only to like 15 years later to be reading the rules for like the 18th time and realizing this game is really poorly designed and the rules don't make any sense.
Would you call Warhammer 40K a toxic hobby? Would you say it abused you?
I mean, no, I still derived utility from it. I shouldn't have derived as much utility from it as I did, but it was like I'm going to compare it to like a drug addiction, because it was probably bad for me and it was a huge money sink, but I liked doing it at the time.
Do you keep any reminders of Warhammer 40K?
So I sold recently, like 6 months ago.
Yes, we talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah, I sold all those minis, but I still have a handful of them like lying around the house that I kept because
almost
they're
like
awesome.
old Polaroids.
Well, for example, I can reach over and within arm's reach right here. I have this miniature. I'm going to show it to Ben on camera. It is a sorceress that is very well.
She's riding
dressed.
like a horse that has ram's horns.
Yeah, it's like an antelope, giant goat thing or something. And like I actually commissioned a friend of mine to paint this for me. And I gave it to my wife as a gift because she thought it was just so awesome, like this little person here. And so she keeps it on her desk. And go ahead.
Would you ever say that you got engaged with a hobby, but you couldn't make it work and you called it off before you tied the knot?
You really are like trying to compare this to women, aren't you?
Stay with me here, Josh.
I've had a lot more hobbies than women, Ben. You know, that I couldn't make it work. That's probably that I was like really liked. It's got to be lock picking for me.
Yes.
I've got a whole big box of locks that my wife bought me because she's such a supportive and awesome person.
I feel like taking the lock-picking hobby to the next level really borders on the legal side of things unless you're going to become a locksmith.
I don't think so. I just have a bunch of... This is a thing. Like, you can look this up.
I know. There's a classic movie. Unless you're just going to collect locks, which is really expensive, then you need to try it on real locks, and you run out of locks that you own really fast. There's this classic movie called Sneakers with Sidney Poitier and Robert Redford. And in the beginning, they're thieves, like the kind of thieves that break into things and steal stuff, but they're working as people who prove like security systems.
They're like they're like white hat hackers before that was a thing.
White hat hackers. But ultimately, they end up the real fun stuff is in the black hat stuff or the gray hat stuff.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
I've seen this movie with Robert Redford, and it is a classic. People, if you haven't seen Sneakers, go watch it. It's amazing.
Highly recommended. And prescient. It was ahead of its time. So what makes you get bored and start feeling restless with the hobby where you want to move on to a new hobby?
If I run out of space, like if I feel like I've seen all the code and I know like how deep it is, like how deep it goes, and I can see the bottom, like, well, I've explored this space enough that I don't care to explore it anymore. This happened with Pokemon cards because my son, apparently at elementary school, Pokemon cards were like this whole big thing. And I'm like, that's a game. We could totally play this game. And we got some starter decks and I read the rules and we played a couple of games. And Ben, I saw the bottom of that puddle in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I started looking online. I'm like, how does this game have a tournament scene or get any more complex? The answer is it doesn't. Like there are cards that are just objectively better that get printed every once in a while.
Okay, I'm currently friends with the 9-year-old North American national champion.
Well, the 9-year-old national champion of a very shallow game.
His name is Abel Ashby, and he's awesome. How would you describe your perfect hobby? Just in abstract terms. Like if you only had one hobby for the rest of your life, what would it be like?
It would be Magic the Gathering. And I'll tell you why. Because there's infinite space there. There's wonderful storytelling. There's beautiful art.
It's Turing complete?
It's Turing complete. Every 3 months they release a new set, so everything gets mixed up and it's fresh and it's new. And there is the bottomless well of tinkering. Ben, I express myself in my deck construction. And I've been doing that like every spare moment that I've had for the last 2 weeks, like tinkering with the commander deck that I'm planning on bringing to Magic 30.
Nice. Have you ever had a hobby that's kind of like a liberated, forward-thinking hobby that pays its own way?
Probably not. The closest thing that I could probably get to that would be chainmail. Like, people offered to give me money to make them, like, little chainmail dice pouches when I was doing that.
Yeah, that was kind of unique. Is it possible to just be satisfied with one hobby for the rest of your life?
I think so. I think you are capable. If you find the right one that ticks all the correct boxes, you can just settle down and, like, really get to know it and, like, make it your best friend and just live the rest of your days with that one hobby.
I love it. Okay, thanks for taking that down with me for a minute, Josh, and talking about hobbies.
Are you really not going to, like, come back and answer those questions yourself?
Yeah, so someone had asked me that this week, if, like, I had a hobby that I wasn't doing that I was thinking about doing, and I'll tell you probably what it is for me. The one hobby that I watch people do that's really expensive and is like a hobby I have a crush on that I will never ask out on a date. It's like rebuilding the engine on a car.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's, the overhead for that, like, you need space, you need time, you need tools, you need expertise. You're going to get it wrong. It's going to take parts. But, man, I would really like to be the kind of guy that rebuilt the engine on my car.
I mean, yeah, you need a whole 2-car garage and of space and full of specialized tools. But I'm with you. I totally get what you're saying. I mean, that seems appealing until you start thinking about, like, oh, I need to get this O-ring. Let's go to Amazon and wait 3 more weeks.
Yeah, so that's the hobby I have a crush on right now. So, Josh, I think it's time for Bad at Parenting. And since I think you're ready to do this.
Yeah, I'm bad at parenting again. 2 episodes in a row. This is not a good trend.
I'll try to do something bad at parenting this week.
I'll try to be a bad parent for you. Thanks, buddy. That's a good friend.
Yep.
So, yesterday was Friday, and, like I've mentioned before, we have a full schedule. Like, we try to keep our kids active.
Yeah, you have like one day a week that's like the amnesty day, but the rest of the days you're doing like soccer practice, dance practice, you're taking the kids climbing, you're doing activities and birthday parties and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. And so we've recently, like, been tweaking it because now we have flag football that's coming up that's throwing a monkey wrench into the schedule, but it's going to shake out fine. Yesterday was Friday. Yesterday was one of our 2 climbing days a week. And I really like the climbing days, like, for me, because that's one thing I get to take the kids to, where the kids get to participate and they have fun. And then I get to do something, and I go at it like it's a workout. Like, I do sets, and they've got, like, a little pull-up bar in the back, and I'll take advantage of that, like, towards the end of it. And, like, I feel like I get a good
Do you prefer exercise. The tall climbs, or do you prefer the bouldering?
So, my son prefers the bouldering. I prefer the tall climbs because there's a rope that will catch my giant, like gravity hates me, Ben. And, like, I
so
need
if you
something...
fall off a boulder, even if you're like 4 feet in the air, it's too much of an impact.
All right. So it's funny you say this story because we went climbing today. Actually, we were supposed to go yesterday. We didn't. I'll get to that when we get to the bad at parenting. We went climbing today, and over on one of the bouldering walls, they had a new route that's like that they marked as easy, but it, like, starts upside down, and then you work your way out to the side and go to the top. And I was like, oh, well, that's too cool not to try. And I accidentally got to the top of it before I realized how high I was. And so I'm up here at the top of this thing, like starting to get a little scared and nervous. Like, there's nothing holding me up here except myself. And so I carefully and gingerly climb back down. And then I landed, and I turned immediately to my wife, who's sitting on, like you do.
You were like a cat kid. Up a tree.
No, I got down. But, like, I was just like a little kid at Christmas for a second. I turned around, like, did you see me? I got all the way to the top.
I'm glad you have someone in your life.
And in her perfectly patronizing way, she goes, yes, I got a picture. And she showed me the picture of me climbing this boulder at the top of it, okay? And here's the thing, Ben. Looking at the picture, I was 5 feet off the ground.
Oh.
And I was so scared when I was up there. Like, I'm at the top of this thing, and there's no ropes holding me.
Yeah, that's good. That's nice that you have someone in your life that you can get excited about things like that with.
Yeah. Anyway, back to bad at parenting before that tangent. So yesterday was supposed to be our climbing day, and I was excited. Like, I had spent hours upon hours trying to cram last minute for my test. I can
feel the parenting dilemma coming.
And so, like, I'm excited. Like, I want to go climbing. This is my time. I'm going to pick up my kids from school. We're going to get in the car. I'm going to go straight there. We're going to be there for a couple hours, get a good workout and some fun in, and then come home. And they're in the car for 5 seconds. And in 3 minutes, Ben, in 3 minutes, it went from, yay, it's Friday, let's go climbing, to you are both grounded and you have ruined my whole day.
Oh, geez. 3 minutes. Okay, hang on. I want to take a tangent here because this is part of my parenting philosophy, and I think this is a good time to talk about it. So, as a parent, I decided early on that I never wanted to do the thing I've heard other parents do where they make empty threats that there's no way they either can or would ever follow through on. So I always made sure that if I ever made threats to my kids, they were never empty threats. In fact, I sometimes gleefully look for opportunities to follow through on my threats so they know that I never make empty threats. So if I ever said something to them like, you knock it off or I'll turn this car around, I always made sure I turned the car around at least once so that there was no mistake. And they were elbowing each other and going, shh, Dad'll turn around. Not like,
yes.
Go ahead because Dad's not really going to do it.
When I was, I did a summer vacation tour when I was at the academy as a training instructor at Lackland Air Force Base for all the basic training, like airmen that came into the Air Force.
Yeah.
And I remember a senior drill instructor telling me, it was a lot better when we could hit them because you'd only have to do it once. Like the first day, the first time somebody mouthed off even a little bit, you just smack them right in the face really hard. And then the rest of the 6 weeks was just super easy.
They're scared to death.
Yeah, they're just terrified of it happening again, so they never do it. Like nobody would ever do anything bad ever again. Same type of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so the kids get in the car, but what did they do, Josh? How bad could it have been, honestly?
Oh, man, it was an avalanche, Ben, because it started as one tiny snowflake of nonsense that condensed and turned into this giant wave of just terribleness.
But were you fueling it?
I don't think I was. Here's what happened. And so I sit down I sit down in my car with both the kids are buckled into their seats. I ask them, "Hey guys, how's your day? Good. You ready to go?" "Yes." "All right, let's go." And I start pulling out of the parking lot. Before I'm out of the parking lot, Jane goes to me, "Carter called me a snitch." And I go,
"A what?"
"A snitch."
Why would she even use that word? She's 7.
Well, because that's what Carter called her. Carter called her a snitch.
So he said something to her in the tone of voice that she thought it was an insult. Even though she doesn't know what that word means, she decided it was time for the fighting with the sibling game?
Yes. And so I asked Carter, why did you call her a snitch? Because she snitched on me. Okay, what were you doing that she decided to tell on you about? And Jane goes, well, he was doing it like, Jane, I'm not talking to you. We will talk to you separately in a moment about tattling. Carter, what were you doing that she snitched on you for? Well, I was playing a game on my computer. Were you supposed to be playing a game on your computer? Jane again. No, he wasn't. He wasn't supposed to be playing games at all. Jane, we are not talking to you. We are talking to your brother. And he goes, I asked him, were you supposed to be playing games? No. I'm like, okay. And he goes, but she totally snitched on me and told somebody. I'm like, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you. Son, do you know what you could have done to never be snitched on ever again? And he goes, I could just do the things that I'm supposed to do on my computer unless Jane's standing over my shoulder and going to tell me for every little thing. And I'm like, stop it. Why are you, and like both of them, like I was, I'm getting too much into the details.
No, they're beautiful details. They're perfect. This is important. Keep going. It was this back and forth, like echo chamber of, all right, children, here's my expectation. I am going to talk to each of you. Both of you did something wrong. I'm going to talk to each of you separately about the thing you did wrong and how we can do better in the future. But I wasn't able to finish either one of the conversations because one or the other or both were trying to rat out the other one. Dogpiling on the other.
Yes, and I'm like, it doesn't matter how many times I said, like, it doesn't matter about what she did. I'm talking about you.
Okay, another tangent. So this problem that you're describing, I think, happens with in any family where there's more than one child. And our family was experiencing it. Probably it reached its zenith when we lived in Italy. And the kids were 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2, and 12. 12 down to 2. And they were doing this thing that you're describing. And one time my wife and I were really frustrated. And we sat down together without the kids and we're like, what are we going to do about this? We were trying to even describe the behavior. It was like we were trying to parent one child and the other child wanted to parent also.
Yes, that's the problem.
What we did that helped us solve the problem is that we keyworded it.
Okay.
We came up with a new vocabulary word to describe that behavior as its own sin. Then we could call that out and make trouble for that. and it caused the behavior to go away.
Well, and this is eventually, like, fast forward, like an hour or two, and that's exactly what my wife did. She didn't keyword it. We don't have a word for it yet, but she identified, Jane, you don't worry about what your brother's doing. You worry about Jane.
Yes. Okay, so that way you say, when you say that to a child, it takes too long to say it. If you can shrink all that down into a single keyword that tells them all of that, it's so efficient. So since we lived in Italy at the time, the word that we used to describe this behavior was pace, which means peace in Italian. So whenever we were parenting one child and the second child started piling on, we'd look at the second child and say pace, which meant shut up, you're not a parent.
That's pretty good.
And it worked. Now, you don't have to use that word. Maybe come up with your own word. But just keywording the behavior so I could shorten that whole lecture of, hey, I'm trying to talk to this child right now, but you're piling on and that's not helping and that's not allowed. You can shorten that down to 2 syllables. It's really efficient.
I'm really glad I have your permission to use a different word. Thank you for that. That makes it more implementable.
So let me know what word you come up with, because I promise keywording this problem will help solve it.
If it rears its ugly head again, I will try it.
Okay.
So here's the thing. Like, I wasn't able to get one sentence out, like trying to explain. And again, this is all taking place in the time it's taking me to drive from the school. And I'm on the way. I'm on the route to go to the climbing gym that we go to. But I haven't passed the road that we would turn off of to go home, which is 2 miles from the school.
So you're no longer looking forward to going to climbing gym. You're just frustrated with kids who are piling on.
I'm frustrated with both of them. Like, guys, we're trying. Like, I'm trying to talk to you about this. We're supposed to be going to this good thing, and they were both. There's a way. Like, sometimes kids will like argue and bicker, but it's like no big deal. They were both very emotionally vested in making sure that the other person got the maximum punishment possible. It wasn't like a normal spat.
You need to cut the red wire on this bomb.
I agree. If it happens again, we'll see. But like sometimes like they'll just fight and you tell them, hey, knock it off, and they stop and they're fine and they can play together for another 3 hours. This was not one of those times.
Yeah, I get it.
And so I'm sitting in the front of the car driving, and I'm like so frustrated now. And I'm like, why? What can I do to really drive home that this behavior is unacceptable? I'm like, oh, you know what? We're not going climbing today. And both of them just froze. What? I'm like, you both are being complete pills to each other, to the point where I can't even explain to you about what kind of a pill you're being without you interrupting me to talk bad about the other one. Why should I reward this behavior by taking you to do something fun? No, I'm going to punish both you and myself, and we're just going to go home. And then I turned off, and they were just both so devastated.
Did they cry?
They didn't cry, no.
Okay, so was this one of those things where like you gave them, you thought you were having this moment and its consequence, and they just moved on with their life and didn't care?
No, because after we got out of the car, I stopped them both in the drive-in. I'm like, do you know why we're not going climbing? And then I got kind of like weird looks. Because like this is the thing. Like if you're going to punish your kids, it is absolutely critical that they equate the punishment with the behavior that you are trying to like correct.
Right. Yes.
And both of them looked at me kind of like they didn't know what I was talking about. And so I was like, okay, think about it. Think about what you've done. Think about all the things that we've ever taught you. And I'm going to ask you this question again at dinner, and then we will discuss it.
Ooh, nice. I like it.
Right?
Okay.
So that gives me time to prepare my notes, and that gives them time to like think and see if they can make the connections on their own. So I thought that was a good solution. Ben, that was a terrible solution.
Why?
So 2 reasons. One, apparently, I don't remember saying this, but my children both got it into their heads that I wanted a written answer by dinner time. And so separately, without any collusion, they both wrote down their answer to my question why they got in trouble on Friday.
Okay, wait, that's not a problem. That's awesome.
Well, it's a problem because both of them got it wrong. So no, I took a picture of the written answer of both of my children, and I would like to read them on the podcast.
Okay, but I gotta I'll put it on the Facebook photo album for the show because your daughter's spelling is awesome.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so my son wrote this one and handed it to me as I was making dinner. It said, I'm not going rock climbing either because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, or I call Jane a snitch, I have no idea which one is correct or not.
Ooh, sarcasm. All right.
I didn't read it as sarcastic. I read it as like
whatever. I don't know why I'm not going. It's something Dad's whatever he's talking about.
Yeah, and both of those are wrong. So
yeah, okay.
Great. And then, all right, so I didn't know my daughter was writing it down. My wife had to discover this because she is the star student this week. And so one of the things that she has to do is she was given a journal that every other star student for like the last 2 years has taken home.
Does this mean that a teacher is going to see her essay on this topic?
Oh no. My wife tore that out of the book.
No.
Yes. No.
Disaster.
Stop it. No, stop it. Like that's not what we're sending back to school. And so apparently she was in her feels. This is the scene as it was described to me, is that she had spoken to her Echo Dot and said, Alexa, play sad music. And it was playing some kind of sad music. And she was sitting in a beanbag chair.
She wanted mood music so that she could be depressed about not going climbing.
She was sitting in her beanbag chair
injustice.
With the journal in her lap writing. And then my wife walked in and was like, what are you doing? She goes, just thinking.
What song was it playing? Please tell me you know what song it was playing.
I don't know what song it was playing.
All right. Read her response.
So my wife looked in the journal, and this is her essay. Friday is not good. Oh, no. Friday is not going good for me and Carter. We can't go on screens because Carter called me a smirk. We could not go climbing today. And there's this wonderful little picture of me, really mad, driving my car with both of my children, also very mad, in the back seat.
How can you tell you're mad?
Oh, because I've got the full upside down circle, half circle frowny face, and the giant V between my eyes.
Pointy down eyebrows.
The super hard pointy down eyebrows. And Ben, I'm going to tell you right now, like, I had cooled down a little bit, and when my wife showed me this, like, I melted a little, like, oh no, I don't want to be this person. I don't want to be remembered as this grouchy, angry, eyebrowed caricature of a parent.
All right, I'm telling you, Josh, keyword the piling on behavior, and it will solve this problem. It was magic. My wife and I decided to do this, and then the more it came up, the more we realized it just made it really easy to deal with.
Again, like I said, when it happens again, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'm interested to hear how that goes. All right.
I'm going to send you
Josh,
both these pictures for the show notes before.
You're not bad at parenting. This is normal.
These are normal things. You're fine.
Okay. So I want to hear about the glass, though.
So here's another. I don't know if this is bad at parenting again or just maybe just a panicked moment that I wanted to talk about because I thought it was unique. So for my mom's birthday, her 3 children, my siblings, we all pitched in and we bought tickets for everybody to go to like a show house, like a playhouse that does dinner and like a musical show.
That sounds awesome.
It was nice. We all sat like in proximity so we could talk and like move seats and things. And they did the play was okay. It was fine. My family listens to this podcast, so I can't disparage it too hard. It wasn't the best musical I've ever seen, but it was entertaining and cute, and the kids liked it, so it was fine. Here's the thing, though, is we were sitting down at these tables, and it was like, it's kind of fancier. It's like a bunch of it's an adult thing, and everybody dressed up. And then my daughter took her spoon, and then she just very gently started like tapping it to the side of her glass, making that ringing noise. Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, and Ben, like, I panicked. Like, I grabbed her hand and was like, no, do not ever do that. And like, she looks at me like aghast, like, why not? And I said, because that is the sound that will cut through every conversation in this room and gather all attention. Like, that's the sound that you make when you have to make an announcement.
Okay.
And so here's the thing is, half of my brain panicked and immediately started trying to stop her. But do you know what the other half of my brain did, Ben?
If everyone stopped what they're doing and paid attention to her, what would she say in her speech?
No, not her, me.
Oh.
Like, if everyone did stop talking and stare up at me, the other half of my brain was frantically drafting like a toast or a speech that I could like stand up and give.
That would have been awesome. Okay, I had a chance to do that once.
Oh, goodness. Go ahead.
Okay, so every year or so, my church family will have some kind of just like big gathering. Sometimes it's a big Christmas party, sometimes it's a big like back to school party. When we moved to Illinois from Europe, our first summer there, we'd been there for 2 months, and they'd had a big party where they rented out the community pool. So they had a big picnic under the pavilion, and then we all went to the pool, and there was probably about 150 people there. And there was a point where the music had stopped, and it happened to be my 16-year-old daughter's birthday.
Okay. This is Kaya?
Yeah, this is Kaya. It was Kaya's birthday. And these people kind of knew that we were the new family, but they didn't know us, and we were all there for different reasons. And I wanted everyone to sing happy birthday to Kaya.
Oh, you didn't.
I totally did.
For a 16-year-old girl, I'm surprised you're still alive.
I know. So I said, and she never lets me forget about it, thank you everyone for coming to Kaya's 16th birthday party.
Oh, you evil, twisted SOB.
And everyone laughed, and then we sang the song, and it was great, and she loves it to this day.
Oh, she loves it?
Yes. It was great. She went on to become friends with those people, and it was just one of those classic. It got laughed off as a funny dad joke, and everyone sang the song, and then everyone came up to her later and said happy birthday, and it was a lovely introduction for our family into that group that we later became very close with.
Dude, that's a level of mortifying that they make whole sitcoms about.
Yeah, it was great. Okay, Josh, it's time for Bad at Logic.
Woo! Well, this is an odd episode. I'm the odd one, so I'm going to do a bias.
All right.
So, Ben, interestingly enough, we have talked about this bias a whole bunch of times on this podcast, but we've never actually done the card for the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Okay.
So what it says on the card is the more you know, the less confident you're likely to be. And this is illustrated excellently in a chart that tracks on one side on the y-axis is your confidence level, and on the x-axis is your knowledge in the subject.
Okay.
And it starts low and it peaks very, very quickly, and then it drops off in this very not super steep, but a slope that goes down precipitously, and then climbs back up on the other side once
very
you have
slowly.
Vastly more knowledge.
Yes. Okay. I'll put that in the photo album. I had a question about the Dunning-Kruger effect for you. About earlier, you mentioned I'd ask you a question: what causes you to get bored with a hobby?
Okay.
And you described it like when you feel like you have understood the hobby and it no longer challenges you. Would you say potentially that that's you being at the peak of the Dunning-Kruger effect curve, as opposed to the early on peak where you have high confidence, low knowledge, as opposed to the late on peak where you have high confidence, high knowledge?
That's interesting. In the specific example I gave for the Pokemon trading card game, I like to feel like I'm slightly educated on the trading card game scene just because of my exposure to other similar games.
So that's what I'm asking. Do you think there's a possibility that maybe you're underestimating Pokemon and it's actually deeper than you thought?
Well, this is an impossiple question.
Right, because you don't know.
Well, no, either I say, no, I absolutely knew everything about it and illustrate that I'm a fool.
You're at the peak of the Dunning-Kruger curve.
Yeah. Or I say, no, I don't think so, and then I admit that I didn't give the game its fair shot.
Okay. All right, well then, I succeeded in giving you an unwinnable question.
I did not give Pokemon its fair shot.
Yes, so the Dunning-Kruger effect we see exhibited in our life in lots of ways. We've talked about it in this podcast before, but I'm sure that will not be the last time.
Well, before we get off the topic about biases and fallacies on the even episodes, I do want to bring this up. Ben, this deck is getting kind of thin. We're running out of pre-canned packaged biases and fallacies.
There are 48 cards in our critical thinking cards deck, 24 logical fallacies, 24 cognitive biases, and we've been doing this since episode 42, and we're on episode 81. I think we've only missed one episode, so sometime in the next couple of months we're going to run out of cards. Do we start over from the beginning?
I don't know. I feel like that's disingenuous to longtime listeners and to us. Like, we want to learn new things. All the old stuff, we know that. We're experts.
I love it. I feel like you're articulating one of the core values of the Bad at Magic podcast.
I read it once on a card. I know everything there is to know about that Dunning-Kruger effect. So here's one thing that I think we could do is I think we should engage our vast listener base. Like listeners, if you have something that we can replace our bad at logic segment with, and that's a nice little slice of that's learn a little something today and be a little smarter, we'd love to hear your feedback.
Okay, good. I love that idea. I'll also say, Josh, that I've been doing some research, and there's a good, probably equal part again of readily available biases that aren't on and fallacies that aren't on these cards that we can start to mine.
There you go. So listeners, that's one of your options. If you want us to just keep talking about ways that other people can be wrong, I'm happy to do that.
All right, it's time for Bad English. So for Bad English today, Josh, I want to give you a lesson on something I learned when I got to my exchange tour in England with the Royal Air Force. And that is, I found out that the Royal Air Force does not use the same names for their ranks in their military that we do. Specifically, I'm talking about the officer ranks. For those that aren't familiar, the United States Air Force uses the same names of the ranks of their officers as the United States Army. We'll talk about in a minute why.
Frankly, that's correct. Like that those are the correct ranks. The other services are just being weird and persnickety.
But really, this gets to the heart of what it means to have a separate military service, because your totality of your military is what you think of as your war-making machine, the arm of government that can enact violence on behalf of the elected body or king or ruler or whatever it is.
You love throwing around terms like laying your life on the line and like defending the country through violence. Dude, you're an IT executive.
Thank you for trying to extract my job away, but we still essentially at the heart of what my identity is as a member of the active duty Air Force is to break things and kill people on behalf of our elected leadership.
Than on our 6 degrees to Kevin
At
Bacon.
the will of the American people.
You are like 1 degree closer to murder than I am. And like, come on.
Okay, I'll allow you to continue to try to say that just because I don't currently do violence means I never will, and it's not within the possibility. That's fine. That's fine. We'll talk about that later. But again, like you said, it's probably correct to just call all your officers by the same thing. But then again, there's also there's some value to be had in having something that's different enough to deserve a different name, have a different name. So in your officer corps, most officers have somewhere near the number of 10 tiers. And it's like a pyramid, with the most at the bottom and the fewest at the top. And people are relatively familiar with these. They know there's generals and a 4-star general being at the top of the pyramid and lieutenants being at the bottom of the pyramid. So here are the tiers for the Royal Air Force. Pilot officer, flying lieutenant, squadron leader, wing commander, group captain, air commodore, air vice marshal, air chief marshal, and marshal of the Royal Air Force. Now, these are great because they're very descriptive of the units that they command. So it kind of has an intuitive feel to it. I feel like this is an error that we didn't do this in the U.S. Air Force, but like you also pointed out, there is value in using the same names as your sister service.
Yes, just
I'm torn.
It makes it easy to translate. It makes it easy to understand when you're doing cross-service things. Who's who? At the very least, use the same insignias.
Yeah.
Like we do that, but like for example, the Navy uses the same. For the most part, they use the same insignias on like their battle dress uniforms. But then they put on their dress uniforms, and boy, you've got to check and see how many like their barcodes on their shoulders, like how thick bar, thin bar, thick bar. Oh, that's an 05. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's value in being the same, and there's value in being unique. And I think we'll talk about that today as we get to our feature. In fact, it's probably time to make that transition. So for our feature today, we're recording on the 17th of September, 2022, which is tomorrow will be exactly 75 years since the birth of the United States Air Force as a separate service. I assume they drill this into your head at the academy?
Yeah, probably, but that's also must be part of the memories that I repressed. Like There is a key phrase that you could say that would make me spout that phrase as if I was a programmed sleeper agent
I wish
with the
I
Russian
knew
military.
it. Like talking to the Winter Soldier.
Basically, yes. There's a lot of programmed challenge responses in my brain that come out when you ask certain questions.
Okay, Josh, who was the first Secretary of the United States Air Force, September 18th, 1947?
I don't know.
Dang.
All right, so, oh, gosh, we're going to start already. So we actually had these, oh, Ben, oh, you're bringing up so many horrible memories. So when we first got there, we were given this tiny book, and it was about this big. It was about 4 inches by 3 inches.
Yes.
And it was called Contrails. And
okay, contrails means the things in the sky that represent that a plane has gone by.
Yes. That's why. But anyway, this tiny book had everything in it. Like this, it was given to us as freshmen, as 4-degree cadets.
Little trivial facts and knowledge about the history and existence of the United States Air Force.
Ben, it had the complete history of the United States Air Force. It had the entire rank structure of every service of the military in the United States. It had the silhouettes of every active duty service plane that any service in the United States flew, along with like a bunch of facts about them.
Okay, so
pages
this was not handed to you as a keepsake. This was
this
was the introduction of a hazing ritual that would last 4 years.
By the end of this year, you will have memorized this book. That is what I was told.
Right.
Like the 4 verses of the Star Spangled Banner in it. Did you know the Star Spangled Banner had 4 verses? Yeah. I didn't. At one point, I could sing all 4 of them, but that's completely useless. So I dumped it out of my brain. Neither here nor there. But we also had weekly knowledge bowls, Ben, where they would, like, the squadrons would take their freshmen and they would pit them against other squadrons' freshmen and be like, our freshmen are like
they
hazed.
Know more of these useless facts in the contrails than your freshmen do.
Yes, our freshmen are nerdier, or we beat them harder than your freshmen, and we're going to prove it by making them go head to head and answer these questions.
I bet you were a valuable asset in these knowledge bowls.
I was, but for all the wrong reasons. It was stupid things, like questions like, what is the 26th word of the Air Force song?
Oh my gosh, that is stupid. Not only that, but then you start to abstract away the value of the knowledge if you just turn it into like that kind of information. You're taking knowledge and turning it back into just letters.
Yeah, it was brutal and terrible, and I hated it.
But
again, that stuff is still rattling around in my brain somewhere, and sometimes at inconvenient points it'll crop up and I'll just spout some challenge response phrase.
Okay, well, the way the United States Constitution defines the existence of its services is that the executive branch of the government carries out war, and the way that we lead it is through civilian leadership. So the president appoints a secretary of a component service, and that secretary leads that service on his behalf. And on the 18th of September, 1947, W. Stuart Symington was sworn in as the first Secretary of the United States Air Force. And that was 75 years ago, so we're celebrating the 75th birthday of the United States Air Force.
That was the culmination of a long-fought battle.
Yes, let's talk about that.
All right, so there was a handful of Army people, Army officers that fought in World War II and that were aviators, because there was no separate Air Force, just the Army did all the airplane stuff. And they recognized that this is an inherently different thing than every other Army ground-pounding function that exists. And without its own separate leadership chain that understood the challenges of aviation, and probably more importantly, without its own separate budget, like this whole aviation air corps of the Army was going to take a back seat to what was the real, what the Army thought was the real winner of the war, and that was tanks and artillery and ground weaponry.
Yeah, if you want to try to distill it down to like a very central point, it is that you only have a limited amount of resources, people and money, and your leaders will spend that on the things that they think are the most important. And if you have your Air Force being controlled by someone who has the objectives and mindset of someone who's trying to achieve ground objectives with ground troops, he only thinks of his Air Force as supporting of those goals.
Exactly. And so it's important that these individuals recognize that the Air Force could be a separate thing and probably should be a separate thing, if for no other reason than the capability would wither and die if it was left to the Army. And let's be clear, this was to the detriment of their careers. There was a lot of people that torched their military careers fighting that fight.
Okay, and I love that idea, and I think that's part of our heritage, Josh. Are these people that took personal risk to see air power become developed into something that it is today. So I want to tell one of the stories. Are you familiar with Project B?
Maybe, but I'm not familiar with that name.
Okay, so in the years following World War I, it was apparent that air power had the potential to be useful, but had not yet been proven in any kind of meaningful, substantial way. So there are some theorists and some believers that says, if we really had the resources, we could make this more of a thing and potentially save lives, achieve objectives faster, but we got to fight for these limited resources. To give an example, in that time period, something resembling the modern bomber, or at least the World War II era bomber, was starting to be developed, and they could create them at a cost about 1,000th of a modern battleship. But a battleship was thought to be the pinnacle of human military technology and projection of power. And so they were wanting to build more battleships. So if you can take one battleship and have it not be built, then you have enough resources to build 1,000 bombers.
Okay.
So there was a colonel at the time, Billy Mitchell, who's some consider to be the father of the modern Air Force, who was fighting to get some of these resources because he saw the potential of air power to be an influence in modern warfare.
I do know exactly what you're talking about, but please continue. You're doing such a great job.
So he proposed an exercise, a demonstration of the capability of bombers to achieve the kind of effects. So specifically, the tension here was over the existence of battleships and bombers. And he basically said, I could blow up your battleship with my bombers. And there were some people, specifically the Secretary of War, which is like the Secretary of Defense now, and the Secretary of the Navy, that were so convinced that Billy Mitchell was wrong about this, but he wouldn't shut up about it and kept getting attention of members of Congress, that they staged an exercise to publicly humiliate him. So they took some ships that they were going to decommission, and they set them up, and they set up this exercise, and they tried to stack the deck against him so that he wouldn't succeed. But he cheated, and he fought, and he flew these bombers out, and he sunk these ships and changed the history of air power in the United States.
He did this awesome thing called skip bombing, where he came in low and fast as he could, and he dropped the bombs, and the bomb would skip on the surface of the water like a thrown stone until it went right into the side of these battleships.
Awesome. So before we had torpedoes you could drop from an airplane, he found a way to turn their primitive munitions that they had at the time into torpedoes, and was able to sink these ships. And this staged humiliation that the Secretary of the War and Secretary of the Navy had come up with backfired on them, and they lost their resources, and the Army Air Corps was born.
You hear stories like that, and all I can think about is if that happened in the modern day, there would be such great YouTube cuts or TikToks edits of that thing. The actual news footage would be Billy Mitchell landing his bomber and slowly walking down the his gangway or whatever, and saluting his officers, whatever. And within seconds, there would be somebody that would have superimposed some kind of club DJ music and put sunglasses on him, confetti piling from the sides. It would be awesome.
Yeah. So humanity likes to act in ways that are predictable and kind of true to the traditions of the past. But in order to harness a new technology and do something different, you need to innovate. And it takes people like Billy Mitchell who are willing to risk their career, risk public humiliation, do something different than what's been done in order to challenge the ideas of the past. So another time that this was true, fast forward 20 years, Billy Mitchell's had some time, they've developed some technology, and they had, I think it was the B-47 bomber about the time of before the U.S. had yet entered World War II. So just prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Let's see, it was B-25. Okay, so what happened, as you know, in December of 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and the Americans were kind of caught flat-footed and unexpected, and it was humiliating for a nation as powerful as the United States to have suffered such a sound military defeat. And the American people had this expectation, just like we did after September 11, 2001. What are we going to do about this? How are we going to fix it? How are we going to get revenge on the Japanese? How are we going to show them that we won't be held hostage to this? So they turned to all their military planners, as you do. You have civilians, like the President of the United States, FDR at the time, turned to his military guys and says, what can we do to get back at the Japanese?
And then everybody in the room just kind of like kept looking around at each other, seeing if anybody had any ideas. And there was one colonel in the back that's like, sir, I've got a really stupid idea that I can make work.
And sometimes if you're the only colonel in the room with a stupid idea and no one else has an idea, your idea gets done. So what was the stupid idea?
So this is Colonel Doolittle.
Yes.
He decided that, you know what? I'll bet. I have a feeling that if we strip down like a B-24,
a B-25.
B-25, we strip down a B-25 and take everything that's heavy out of the thing and like just fill it with nothing but gas and like a handful of bombs, I bet I could get that thing to take off of an aircraft carrier.
Uh-huh. And fly over Tokyo and drop those bombs, but not have enough gas to get back to the carrier.
And not have enough gas to get back to the carrier.
And it can't land on the carrier
which
anyway.
Which they couldn't land on anyway. And so it was a one-way trip. And they figured it out, and they practiced. Like, if you ever watch that horrible, horrible Ben Affleck movie about Pearl Harbor, you can see
it's not Ben Affleck's fault. It was a Michael Bay movie. Give the blame where it belongs. Michael Bay, you hack.
We'll talk. We need to do an episode about Michael Bay. And they were practicing, and they figured out they could finally get these things off the ground. Like, they didn't even have guns on them. Like, there was nothing on these planes. And the plan was to drive to the middle of the ocean, take off in like almost the middle of the night, and then in the wee early hours of the morning, bomb a handful of like random targets in Tokyo. And then it's a one-way trip, so we're just going to keep flying to China. And then try to land close.
No target airfield, or really no way to navigate there. It's just find something to land and hope you live. It was a suicide mission.
These were the days of dead reckoning. And Ben, let me tell you, going through my abbreviated pilot training that I went through, we had to learn dead reckoning. We had to learn how to navigate using a map, a compass, and this weird like slide rule, but it was a circle and it was made for like flying and drifting. I remember I could do it because it's just math and I'm good at math. But I remember being in the classroom with the guy teaching us this, and we're all doing an exercise, and I just dropped all of my materials and say, why are we doing this? He goes, because you need to know how to navigate. And I said, I've got GPS in the plane. He goes, what happens if the GPS fails? I go, then I'll turn on the backup GPS. He goes, and what if that backup GPS fails? I go, then I'll pull out my phone and I'll use the GPS on that. This technology is so
You're perfectly
ubiquitous.
illustrating the like our elementary school teacher that was trying to teach us to do arithmetic, and you're like, it's not like you're always going to have a calculator in your pocket.
Joke's on you, Mrs. Samdahl. I have a calculator on me 24/7.
Yeah. So Jimmy Doolittle proposed this really audacious solution. Now, if someone insults you and you come back 3 days later and slap them in the face, they might forget that what it was that you're slapping them for. So there was this really heavy public pressure for this retaliatory action against the Japanese to happen as quickly as possible. This almost never happens in the military. We're like, all right, Jimmy Doolittle, what do you need? We'll give you as much money and people and everything as we can give you, as the American people can muster to make this happen. And he did. He stripped down the planes. They did practice runs. They came up with this really audacious plan that risked a lot of lives, but ultimately succeeded in achieving, I guess, the objective of flying over Tokyo, dropping a few bombs, and crash landing in China. And of the 16 bombers that flew the Doolittle raid, I think 15 of them crashed or were ditched in the ocean. Only one actually landed.
There was, so at the Academy, in Doolittle Hall, there was a big glass case that had a bottle of scotch and a cubby with a silver goblet with the names of every Doolittle raider that went on that raid engraved on these goblets.
Awesome.
And anytime one of these men died, they would open the case, and in a ceremony, they would turn his goblet upside down. And when there are only 2 of them left living, they're going to invite them back to the Academy, and they're going to open up that bottle of scotch.
Josh, I love this. Do you know if that's happened?
I don't know if that's happened.
Oh, I want to know. Okay, so you're pointing out something as I'm kind of just reading through this history as we're reminiscing on the 75th anniversary of the United States Air Force, that you went to the U.S. Air Force Academy, which is kind of this focal point of that they have all the new officers that are the hope of the future of the Air Force, and then we have all this heritage of the past, and we want to instill that in them. So, yeah, some of those efforts were a bit ham-fisted and awkward, but I think that one sounded like it had an impact on you. You went to buildings that were named after these people. You did rituals that were supposed to mimic the things that they did.
Do you want me to tell you the sad part of this story?
Yeah.
Multiple times that case has been broken into and the scotch has been drank by some drunk idiot.
That is sad. That's kind of like the Olympic torch never goes out and like, oh, it did once and they just relit it.
Yeah, basically, that's what happened.
Okay. All right. Whatever. New bottle of scotch. We'll pretend it's the same one.
And then we'll yell at every cadet and make their lives miserable for a week.
Okay, so another bit of heritage we had is following World War I and II, kind of air power had proven itself as its ability to destroy and achieve effects, although that's debatable about whether theories surrounding strategic bombing had the intended impact in the European theater in World War II. Regardless, then we entered the period following World War II and the Korean War that we call the Cold War, where the United States and the Union of Soviet Social Republics arose as these two great superpowers that didn't want to get into direct confrontation because of the existence and proliferation of nuclear weapons, and so they had these kind of skirmishes and proxy conflicts. And one of these was the Berlin airlift.
Oh, yes, the Berlin airlift. This was a major point in history. Hang on a second. I just realized, are we talking about history this whole podcast? Is that what our topic is?
No.
Okay.
We're going to do history for about another 10 minutes, and then we're going to transition to our experience.
Okay.
Here's why I'm dividing it this way, Josh. I've been in the Air Force for 18 years. I just did a calculation. That is almost exactly a quarter of the existence of the United States Air Force.
Oh, wow. You are super old.
So I've been in the Air Force for a quarter of its existence. So right now we're talking about the 3 quarters before I joined. And you were in it. You got in earlier than I did, and
got out earlier than you did too.
Yeah, so we're still talking about that. So Berlin airlift.
So the Berlin airlift, because 3 people basically sat down at a table and carved up all of Europe and the Middle East and Northern Africa after the end of World War II, which led to all of the problems that we're having geopolitically right now.
Yes. So who were those 3 people?
This is Winston Churchill. This was Stalin,
Harry Truman, and Joseph Stalin.
Truman and Stalin. Yes. These are the 3 people that sat down and all right, what are we going to, we shattered Europe into a million pieces. We got to put it back together. Who gets what? And
yeah, there was also, I think, an element of dividing up the spoils of war kind of thing.
There was also this element where everybody realized that this Russian juggernaut was going to be a problem.
Yes.
And so it was almost this de facto alliance against Truman and Churchill trying to be we need to make sure Russia doesn't get more than they should.
Right.
And Russia was... This is, a lot of people will say, historians will say that both the Japanese and a lot of the Germans surrendered not because the Allies were on the brink of destroying them, but because the Russians were coming and they wanted to surrender to somebody that wasn't Russia.
Right. Okay, there's a part of the geography of this I never understood my whole life, and that is, why did the Berlin Wall exist?
Well, and this is, as they were divvying up the spoils of war, the crown jewel that everybody wanted was Berlin, the capital city of your enemy country. And they decided that they were going to split it right down the middle. But I don't know why it got flipped the other way.
Okay, so let me tell you what I finally figured out about this. They divided Germany in half, East and West Germany. Russia basically got East Germany, and the Allies got West Germany. The U.S. and the U.K. got control over the reconstitution effort following West Germany, where they basically enforced the no rearming and rebuilding and all those kinds of efforts. But the problem is Berlin was squarely in the middle of the piece that was given to the Russians by several hundred miles. Gotcha. And like you said, it was a crown jewel and they wanted to divide it up. So what they did is the Russians said, all right, we're going to keep East Germany, but we'll divide Berlin itself up. So fully within Russian territory, the city of Berlin, they just drew a circle around it and cut it into 4 pieces. And 2 of those pieces went to the Russian and the other 2 went to the US and the UK.
And so the idea there being that one half of Berlin would be living under democracy and the other half would be living under the Iron Curtain, hammer and sickle of communism.
But fully surrounded
by communism.
Russian territory.
And so the
it's
Russians,
this little tiny half circle there.
And at one point the Russians were you know what, we could probably just, besiege them and starve them out. And so then they stopped allowing Allied shipments of goods and services and foodstuffs from the west part of Free Germany into Berlin through Russian territory.
Right.
It's like, what do we do? These people are going to starve. We have to give up the country. Or, I've got a stupid idea, sir. And they just decided to get like every plane that could hold more than a sack of potatoes and just send them in this constant stream. Like my son was watching a documentary on this like weeks ago. And like there was just like 5 planes landing every minute. It was crazy the amount of stuff that they were hauling into this city. Like the complete replacement of this giant supply chain that people thought was impossible. But it was this amazing demonstration of air power again.
Exactly. So we have now proven that air power not only has the power to destroy, but it has the power to lift up in the logistics and providing of.
And the best part about air power is you don't know if they're going to drop bombs or if they're going to drop food. So you just got to be scared the whole time.
So are you familiar with Operation Little Vittles?
Is this the one in Afghanistan where you're dropping like bombs and
No, this is during the Berlin airlift.
Okay, no, I'm not aware of this one.
Okay, so Colonel Gail Halverson at the time, actually a member of my church, had this experience where he'd landed his cargo aircraft, I forget the designator of it, in Berlin as part of the Berlin airlift, and there was a group of children outside the fence with their kind of faces pressed against the fence. And he went over to the fence and saw and kind of talked to them, and they basically said, we'll never give up hope as long as you guys are coming. And he was really touched by it, and he reached into his pocket, and all he had was 2 sticks of gum. There was like 30 kids there. So he gave them the sticks of gum, and they like broke it into pieces, and like each kid chewed a little tiny bit of a piece of gum and smelled the wrappers for the ones that didn't get gum. And he was kind of touched by it, but also felt like it was kind of hopeless for them because there was no sign of the end of the Russian blockade that caused the need for the Berlin airlift. So he decided that he was going to start a separate effort that he would basically carry in the cockpit a bunch of candy for children, and he put little parachutes on them made out of handkerchiefs. And then as he would approach the airfield, he would wiggle the wings of his airplane, and the kids would know it was him, and he would throw these handkerchief chocolate bars out the window, and they would parachute down. And this was very popular in the chain of command. He got budget, he got support, and it turned into what was called Operation Little Vittles. It ran for approximately 9 months from 1948 to 1949, and it became a really famous little good application of air power in a way that lifted people's spirits.
Aw. The worst part of this story is that these were planes that had propellers on the sides of the wings, so half the time when he threw them out the window, they'd get chewed up into just like this wood chipper effect.
And I'm sure the kids were happy to find a little wood chip piece of chocolate.
Like sometimes it would be a little parachute of a chocolate bar, and sometimes it would just be like a spray of liquid chocolate across them.
Okay, so these people we've talked about so far, Doolittle, Mitchell, and now Gail Halverson, these were all colonels. And I read a book recently called The Kill Chain by Christian Brose. Christian Brose was the military advisor to John McCain.
Okay.
And he talked in there about how the service promotes generals, and the service is run by generals, but for the most part, they do what they're told and promote the status quo. The innovation comes from colonels that are thinkers, that are willing to take some personal risk, go outside, do things that aren't traditional, and maybe do something a little bit different.
So, yeah, in the time that I was in the Air Force, colonel, like a full bird 06 colonel, is about the time that you have the clout to really start like requisitioning resources and like telling people to do things, and the things happen. But it's before you pin on that 1 star and you come under like public scrutiny for it. And that I have seen and I've heard anecdotes from the mouths of these colonels that sometimes that power is used for good and sometimes that power is used for evil.
Yeah, and we have a toxic relationship with these colonels because we need them to keep things fresh, to promote new ideas, to question the status quo, but we also don't like them. Like the generals don't like those guys. Those guys don't get promoted.
So I'm going to tell, I don't know if this is probably not classified. There was a story that one of the colonels told at the last air base that I was at, and he was super proud of it. And he was the wing commander, and like, I'm going to tell this story. Like, I'm going to have all of the junior officers in a building, and I'm going to tell them stories about how to be good officers. And here's one of the stories that I'm going to tell them. And he talked about how during one of the horrific hurricanes that landed into Cuba and like leveled the place or whatever. I don't remember how long ago this was, but this was in our lifetime. This is in the last like 15 years. There was
Wait. Did he go there and throw rolls of paper towels at them?
No, he didn't. This was the hurricane where like the airport was wiped out, and they had to like airdrop in like 2 Army like Joint Air Task Controllers or whatever, and these 2 guys and a folding table in the middle of an international airport were the entire control tower.
Wow.
And like it was this huge mission to like basically what we were talking about with the Berlin airlift. They were just hauling in stuff that was desperately needed. Like the entire power grid was down. They needed medicine. They needed food. Like they just needed somebody to hold up the infrastructure while they were getting back on their feet after this devastating weather event.
Yeah.
And so this colonel starts telling the story about how there was all these orphaned children that because like their parents had died or whatever in this hurricane, and they were just like kind of gathering at the airport because they had nowhere else to go. And he's like, well, it is terrible what happened to these children, and like we need to do something about it. And so we started asking questions to the chain, like, what can we do? Can we get these kids in like, orphanages in America or something? And the answer kept coming back like, oh, we'll figure something out. And it's going through this long bureaucratic State Department process, right, to figure out what to do with.
Right. And this isn't a box of cargo that you can just sit there until you figure out what to do with it. These are human beings.
Right. And so this guy's telling stories like, so you know what? With my authority, I went out there and there was an empty cargo plane that was leaving. I'm like, hang on for a second. And I loaded this plane full of all these orphans and I flew them to America. And like that was the end of his story. And like he's on the stage telling all these junior officers this, and you can look around and see their eyes light up like, wow, that's what you do. You make the call and you do the thing. And I'm sitting there thinking, what happened to all these orphan children that are not U.S. citizens that when you got back to Florida, did you just like lower the back ramp and scatter them like rats out of your plane? Like, what did you do with them?
But you didn't ask this question.
Of course not, because I'm not that guy. But like all I could think about
I'm that guy.
All I could think about was the bureaucratic processes that were chugging along, that were going to solve the problem, but they were too slow. But all you've done is create a bigger problem. Now you have all these foreign nationals in U.S. territory. What are we supposed to do with them here?
Yeah. I'd be interested to know the second half of that story.
I can promise you, there is a kid like shining shoes or something at the airport in Florida. That's
some homeless orphan that wishes he was back in Cuba.
Oh no, he probably lives like in the rafters, like terminal style, like Tom Hanks. And he's like, oh yeah, I've just been here for 12 years, picked up the language. I earn enough money to get my dinner at the Subway every night. Like I can see that having happened.
Yeah. All right, there's 2 more of these innovators I want to talk about, and then we'll move on to our careers. So another one that was very famous for kind of going against the grain was Colonel Robin Olds. Was he well known at the Academy?
I don't remember the proper nouns.
Colonel Robin Olds was a Vietnam-era fighter pilot who was famous for his tactics and his leadership, but also for being a bit of a rabble-rouser. He had this glorious mustache. Maybe this is why you remember him. That was way out of regulations, but no one could tell him to shave it off. Among other reasons, because he was a triple fighter ace. Meaning he had downed 15 enemy aircraft. And he kind of had this cachet that comes along with being so proficient at his job that even his insubordination is kind of below the radar. Like, he can't be questioned because we don't have anyone else that can fly an aircraft, what do you fly, F-4 Phantom as well as Robin Olds does. So, and this is an interesting thing because this is like a modern day. I know you haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet, but it was the same kind of idea. We had an 06 around that was this relic of the past that we tolerate because he's so proficient and we haven't figured out a way to make machines or young guys do something as good as this old guy can.
You say that, but like if you put like Colonel Robin Olds in like his F4 and threw him against the greenest of green F-22 pilots, he'd get his butt kicked every time.
Yes, you are correct. This was in the period before there was even a third generation fighter that could challenge him, and he might have stood a chance. In fact, I know you haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet, but this scenario we're coming up with is in that movie.
Yes, the old hat guy against the new technology. I get it.
Yes, in the old technology. It's in the movie. Okay. One last one I want to talk about, and he's one of my personal favorites. In fact, I'd like to read a book about him sometime on the podcast. John Boyd. John Boyd was also a fighter pilot who basically decided that it was so important that he think about air combat and the application of air power in a way that was so almost philosophical in nature that he started to become this renowned strategic thinker that was challenging the status quo. He invented such classics as the OODA loop.
He did not invent the OODA loop. Nobody invented the OODA loop. It has existed on a stone tablet in a cave since 4000 BC when some accountant in ancient Egypt came up with this idea that, you know what, if we thought about stuff for 5 minutes, we can make it better.
I stand by what I said. But he constantly fought against the status quo. You know, his ideas were advocating for changes to the platforms and the tactics and the strategies that we had that, while proven in past conflicts, he believed to be dated, because if we didn't continue to innovate and improve and do things in a better way, our enemy was going to prove beyond us. Our current Chief of Staff, the United States Air Force, Chief Brown, says that we must accelerate change or lose, and that's exactly the idea that John Boyd was fighting for. So let's talk about the modern Air Force.
Oh, well, the modern Air Force is a relic of the Cold War era, and I don't think we need it anymore. Ben, what's your hypothesis?
My hypothesis is that even in a democratic society, our government needs to be able to have the capability to potentially do violence.
I agree. You have to have the capacity to back up your smack talk. Yes. Unfortunately, because there are still nation states out there that believe force is the answer to any question.
Yeah. Now, in history, if you create a military that's too powerful, you run the risk of it potentially taking over your government. So you always need to have a way to keep it in check. So in the United States, we've decided to always have our military run by elected civilian leaders who then appoint deputies. And so far, it's worked out for 200 or so years. Basically, then we, as members of the military, almost become abstracted away in that we conduct ourselves by a code of regulations and associated hierarchical rules that we follow. And as long as we follow those rules, we as individuals are free from accountability for our actions because they're done on behalf of this system. So
I love so much when you go on these long monologues about like the gloriousness and the shining statue at the top of the pillar that is the service in the U.S. military. And Ben, buddy, you're working in corporate America. You just wear camouflage instead of a tie.
Yes, I get that you like to believe that. I don't see it that way. I see myself as part of a war machine that has, does, and will continue to execute violence on behalf of the American people. We break things and kill people. That's what we do. I am part of Air Force Global Strike Command. Our job is to maintain readiness of nuclear weapons that could potentially bring thermonuclear war to the world. And Josh, we can if we are called upon to do it.
Ben, I was part of a unit where I did, the person you are speaking to, broke things and killed people.
Yes.
And all I could think about the entire time I was there was the horrifically inefficient processes by which we were doing said killing and destruction.
Yeah, but I don't think that can just be distilled down to then we're just some kind of corporate machine. Like we're still an army. We're still an instrument of violence.
Oh, don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is, yes, the military does have a unique function in the fact that their business is violence, and that effectiveness, not efficiency, is the key driving point, which is why they're so horribly inefficient, by the way.
Yeah.
But my hypothesis here is that we could benefit from a little more, like recognizing that the force needs to be a little more professional and a little less military, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So just to wrap up what I was saying, the point I'm trying to make is that the American people can elect civilian leaders who will order us to do violence on our behalf, and we're protected from them in that we follow the rules that we're given as long as they're ethical and moral, and we can make an individual decision, and then they're protected by us because we follow the rules that they laid out for us. And hopefully those rules make sense and are actually executable. I'll talk about that in a minute. But in order to do all that, then they pile a whole bunch of stuff on top of that to make sure that we as individuals meet those qualifications. So they screen us for medical readiness, mental readiness, level of education, loyalty to the country, ability to keep a secret. Then functional training, professional training, documentation, exercises, inspections, and all of that gets piled on our shoulders.
Well, and you're missing like part of the reason that this stuff exists is because, like you're talking about, it's like, all right, professional military, go out there and kill things and blow stuff up. Like, yes, sir, we will do that. And then the first time they go actually try to do it, they screw it up so horribly that civilian leadership has come to be like, you guys really screwed the pooch on that one. We're going to need you to demonstrate a little, like, do it a little better. And so then the leadership's like, how can we do this a little bit better? Okay, we can do X, Y, and Z. And so they throw X, Y, and Z at everybody. And then we go off and we do something and something else happens. Like, okay, hey, guys, you need to do better. Okay, well, then we need, Q, R, and S. And they throw Q, R, and S at everybody. And like these, it's just this cumulative like pile of nonsense and things that you are responsible for. And like it goes back to like I was in pilot training and they said, here's your CD of documents that you have to adhere to. This is the law that you have to obey every second that you are flying that aircraft. And it was 16,000 pages of text. That is an unknowable quantity. And that applies to every facet of every job that exists in the military because there's only ever going to be more regulation and not less. And so what that does is that creates a culture of, okay, so we're supposed to be doing everything that you see on that shelf, but we do like this book's worth of stuff, and that has worked for us so far, and so we're just going to keep doing that.
I don't argue with what you just said in the least. I think it's right. I think you accurately captured that. No arguments there. In the scene from Captain America, the First Avenger, where he goes and he's trying to get recruited by the army, you see them doing a medical evaluation. That's like the first screening that we do. Like if someone's going to come and be part of this machine, they got to at least be intelligent enough to make it through this process and physically fit enough that we can rely on them.
And that was the start of my horrible career in the military because I had to fake my reflexes on that test.
Yes, and you remember he memorized the eye chart and he was trying to fake his way through the physical examination. Yeah, You've already started this adversarial relationship.
My normal doctor when I was a kid would hit my legs with the hammer and my legs wouldn't move. I guess he wasn't hitting the right spot or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But so I was trained by my father that like, okay, when you go in, because I had to go get a military physical before I went to the academy.
Uh-huh.
Like when he hits you on the leg, just do this, like not too much. Just like flex the muscle just for like just the tiniest second, like just to give a little something.
Wow, you really were trained for this.
Yeah, I had to fake my reflexes for the military test.
Okay, so we determined, let's just talk about the physical aspect of this opponent. Because, doing violence on behalf of the government, at least in the past, required you to have a great degree of physical stamina and strength and those kinds of things. So we wanted to see that someone had that capacity to begin with, and then they had to maintain it thereafter. So we have to verify it and build it.
This is a carryover from the days in World War II when we were taking people off the street and be like, we are going to give you 80 pounds worth of gear. And we're going to kick you off of a boat onto a beach, and you need to run for the next 4 miles to get to cover. Like, can you physically do that without dying?
Right. So initially, we just see if your heart doesn't have any defects, and you can do it. But then we bring you to basic training, and we start kicking your butt. So let's talk about basic training for a minute. You and I kind of had different experience in that. With our enlisted troops, we send them to what do they call it? What is it? What's the 3-letter acronym they use for it?
Who cares?
Anyway, a BMT, basic military training. So they send them to BMT, and you're just there's 2 things. You're trying to break down a person that lived a civilian life and get them to think in a military way, which is order, structure, following regulations, doing what you're told, and then we're also kind of kicking your butt so that you're getting stronger and better stamina and can handle things like getting yelled at.
I think the middle part is the key there is we don't care what you think. If you're coming into the military and you have all these great ideas or these preconceived notions of what your life is going to be like, all of that is irrelevant. You are going to do only exactly what you're told to do, and we're going to reinforce this idea by making this the most miserable time of your life until the only thing you can remember is just do what you're told.
So there's a fundamental difference between officer basic training and enlisted basic training, and that is that in officer basic training, they don't just want you to do what you're told. They also want you to take some initiative and think for yourself. So it's structured slightly differently in that it's supposed to encourage those kinds of things.
Yeah, so your basic training was very different than mine. Because those things that you're talking about, like, we want you to take initiative and think for yourself and be a leader, that comes in the next 4 years. Like, basic training for me was just the basic training
the kick your butt part.
And it was also run by other cadets and not like professional trainers. Like, this is, my whole job in the military is to train people to be military. No, these were kids that one of their summer electives was to yell and beat the crap out of other kids. And so it was pretty bad.
So one of the things that really stuck with me from this time period is how much they focused on the little things. All the ones you think you know from every movie you've watched about basic training. Making your bed real nice, doing lots of push-ups, cleaning your rifle, folding your clothes just so, having your uniform look nice and neat, all those things. And I just thought, what is the point of all this? Like, why do they care if my underwear is touching the back and side of the drawer inside of my drawer?
Oh, well, here's the insider tip. They don't. They care that you have the capacity to find, read, understand, and implement regulations.
Yes, exactly. And if I can do that with underwear, then I can do that with a $30 million jet.
Dude, what's really funny is I had to live under those standards for the entire first year that I was at the academy. The entire freshman year I was there, you lived as if you were in basic training. And so we had one drawer that had all of, they said, like, any of your clothes
your inspection
in your drawers,
drawer?
Yeah, no. All of, like, your whole room, like, everything in your life had to be inspection ready at the drop of a hat, okay?
Uh-huh.
And so we learned all the tricks to get around that. First of all, I never slept in my bed. The entire first year I was at the academy, I never slept in my bed. I slept on top of my bed, and I had, like, an extra blanket that I would put over the top of me, but the made bed never got unmade, ever.
That's horrible.
The drawer, the inspection drawer where all of your stuff needed to be, yes, if you had your clothes in there, they had to be inspection ready. But if you had your clothes in a laundry bag, they were assumed to be dirty. So you had a dirty laundry bag and then a clean laundry bag where you actually got your clothes out of, because then you only had to have one t-shirt, one pair of socks, and one pair of underwear in the entire drawer for inspection.
I think humans are known to do this kind of thing. Just conserve energy. Determine what's the least resistance I can do to get through this trying circumstance. I don't think that's a bad thing.
There's no better place to say this, but I was the bed maker in my squadron. I learned how to make beds and do hospital corners. Like, I was good at origami when I was in middle school. Oh, there's another hobby. I did origami for a long time, and so I was very good at making crisp, clean folds and understanding, like, how to make things lie flat. And so, Ben, when it came inspection time, it was like we divvied up responsibilities, and it was my job to make all of the freshman beds. But then I was also paid by upperclassmen to make their beds. Yeah,
that's awesome.
100%.
I feel like there's a lesson here about the military, but I don't know what it is.
The trick to having perfect, crisp hospital corners is to really tighten it around the foot of the bed and then put a ruler up against the top of it and then fold it down, because it keeps that nice crisp fold underneath as you're tucking.
Wow.
That's the key.
I bet that skill's come in handy over the years, Josh.
Oh, I'm the one that changes the sheets on our bed now.
That's what I said. I wasn't trying to be sarcastic. Okay, so we had a hazing experience in basic training because it was a much shorter experience. So they're trying, instead of doing that to us for a full year, it was just 8 weeks basically where they were trying to do that to us. And there was a ritual that our upper class did that we weren't expecting. Just like you said, you're supposed to be inspection ready at any moment. So they found out when the next inspection would be. They waited until we had to go to, like, chow or class or something like that. We're out of our rooms. And then they snuck into our rooms and, like, undid all the stuff that we'd done.
Ha! Yep, that's a thing.
Unbuttoned our shirts on the hangers, unfolded our underwear in the drawer, got our showers wet, untucked our bed or whatever. But maybe subtle enough that if we came into the room, we wouldn't notice it. Like unbuttoning your buttons on your clothes that were hung up in the closet. So then we come back from class and we have, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes before the inspection. And we kind of look around and everything looks about like it did before we left. And then we go stand out in the hall and wait for the drill instructor to go into our room and inspect everything. And you hear them in there yelling, cursing our names. What in tarnation is this?
So here's a good question for you, Ben. Because our listeners might not be familiar with the idea of what an inspection is. And so we're talking about room inspections right now. Let's talk about room inspections for a second. How long did room inspections last in your basic training?
So I think there's a deliberate effort to kind of fog you into losing track of time and space. But I'm guessing someone somewhere had that on a calendar. And they make it take a long time. Okay. They make you stand out in the hall while you're waiting for everyone to do it. And they've maybe put 1 or 2 hours on the calendar to just inspect a dozen people's rooms.
Okay, so I was subject to room inspections the entire 4 years that I was at the academy. They were planned in advance, so you knew when they were coming. And so as an upperclassman, you could, get it inspection ready before the inspection. But they would inspect the entire cadet wing, all 4,000 of us at the same time on a Saturday morning. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it would take 6 hours.
Ugh.
And we weren't in the hallways.
No wonder you have PTSD from that.
We were in our rooms, and we'd just be standing at parade rest, just waiting for somebody to come around and look at it for 30 seconds. And as an upperclassman, when I had a roommate, we would always be sure to have our chess set put out very neatly on our bookcase that was behind us, and we would play chess the entire time.
At least you had something to do. Like you weren't expected to stand at parade rest for 6 hours.
No, if we got bored, we can mess with the freshmen. One of the fun things to do with the freshmen was you would have a pocket full of change, and then you would learn different ways that you could put a penny between your thumb and your middle finger, and then snap your fingers and flick the coin across the hallway into their room. And so they would have
they would hear
coins.
It come in, but then not be able to find it.
Right, and they're supposed to be at parade rest and not moving. And so they'd have to search frantically with their eyes and scoop up the change before the inspector came in.
Wow. Golly, Joe.
There was also at the academy the phantom pooper. This is a real thing that actually happened. There was a risk that on an inspection day, if you left your room for too long, you might come back to find a human poop in the middle of your room.
What?
Because
I was hoping you were going to say in the toilet.
No, we had community bathrooms, and those weren't inspection. We didn't clean those. Those were we had janitors.
That is gross.
College kids, I don't know what to tell you. And
yeah.
It was a real thing that really happened.
I can't. Oh my gosh. All right. So I want to close the book on basic training. So there's a process. It's universal, I think, in all militaries where you're taking a civilian, turning them into someone that has the military-ness that's necessary to do the military thing. The Air Force is no exception. Ours is known to be different than the other services, and I think that's important. In 1947, when we created a separate Air Force, it was because we needed to separate our identity, our training, our expertise, our knowledge, our strategy from that of the Army so that we could focus on the unique values of air power.
I mentioned this earlier, but one of the summer electives that I actually had to compete for is I was sent down to Lackland Air Force Base, and I was made an apprentice training person at basic military training. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I spent sophomore summer 6 weeks at Lackland Air Force Base training actual enlisted people.
At BMT.
At BMT. Now, granted, I was basically the gopher for the actual trainers, but I still got to walk around and yell at people. And they treated me like an attack dog. They would just stick me on people if they didn't feel like it, if they were tired or whatever.
Okay.
And so I learned all of their standards, all their procedures, and I did all their stuff. And I just wore a different hat.
All right. So you give your summary piece. What do you think the point of all of that is?
Well, and I was just going to pile on to your idea that the Air Force is a little different. And the idea here is that, say in the Army, you're training, the bottom line enlisted person is an infantryman. And when you say, hey, you, soldier, take the hill, that's not a time for a discussion. That's not a time for well, sir, is there a better way that we could maybe go about this? There's no discussion here. You just need to execute the orders that you are given.
Right.
And so they train for that. You listen to the people that are above you. In the Air Force, we're having 18-year-old kids with 6 months worth of training working on the most complex jet engines that have ever been conceived by man. And so we want them to, yes, follow orders and follow regulations, but also feel like they have the ability and the initiative to call out problems.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, this isn't right, and I need to talk to somebody about this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we've gotten better about that over the years. There's been times in the past where we haven't been as good about it.
I remember like implementing this, and it was like week 5 of their 6 weeks of training. And like one of the trainees came in and was like, sir, I have an appointment at this time, but at the same time, we're supposed to be at parade practice, and I don't know what to do. And the way that it's implemented is that the training instructor looks at them with a disparaging look like, well, I'm assuming that you have human intelligence because you haven't been eaten by a street sweeper between now and like when you were a child. So you tell me, what do you think is more important to do in this situation? And like that is like the derogatory, like breaking you down and putting you in the military mold way of, hey, guess what? You're going to have problems and you're going to have to solve them.
Right. You won't always be able to do all the things you've been asked. You'll have to choose and prioritize.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. I like that. Okay. So once we get you in the military and we turn you into a military person, then we've got other stuff we do. There's continual development. Initially, we give you a technical specialty called an Air Force Specialty Code or AFSC, and we send you to tech school where you're taught some kind of training that's separate from just becoming military-like. Now that you're military-like, we want you to be a pilot, a cyber officer, an intelligence person, an aircraft maintainer, whatever it is we decide you do, and you go there and learn a skill set.
I was in my job for 6 months before they sent me to my basic training. And
yeah, but you were a second lieutenant. You weren't like reconfiguring servers.
Oh man, I was so crusty and mean to those instructors.
Yeah, so, we have, and I've done my training. I went to Expeditionary Commissioned Officer Comm Training. I went to Cyber 200, Cyber 300. You went to the RPA school also. How long was that?
That's an excellent question. That I think it was like a calendar year, but our training was way different than what the training for actual RPA is. So I have no idea what it is now.
Yeah, so depending on what it is you choose to do, if you're going to be like an F-16 pilot or you're going to be a cyber officer, there's some amount of training, anywhere from, 6 weeks to a year or more, that you're just learning how to operate that specific weapon system.
I will say, if you're going to be a pilot, you have to go to 6 weeks of basic flying training where you fly little motor gliders and you learn what an airplane is. And they teach you what wings do and what clouds are, like literally. And then you split and you go your tracks. If you're going to be a fighter pilot, then you go learn on this kind of airplane. If you're going to be a heavy pilot or a cargo pilot, you go learn on this airplane. And again, that's like a whole other set of training. And then the planes just keep getting more and more advanced. Like if you're going to be an actual pilot in the Air Force, you get the equivalent of a master's degree in how to fly.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it could be a couple of years before you ever actually start doing the thing you were hired to do. So then the Air Force requires you to like stick around for a while after that. All right.
I'm going to break it to you because like you're talking about, it takes a couple of years to train up a pilot, right? And the schools for these, they have start and stop times. Like there's like a flow through point. And so not everybody can go all at the same time. And so one of my buddies that he graduated a year after me at the academy. We were friends while we were there. And then he was put on casual status. It's like, hey, your school for pilot training doesn't start for a year. And in that year, we don't have anything for you to do. So we're going to assign you.
But you can't leave.
But you can't leave and you still work for the military. So we're just going to stick you in a random pilot squadron and you're just going to like learn stuff. Like you're just going to be around real pilots for a year and then we'll send you to training. And that's called casual status, okay?
Uh-huh.
And so, like, he was coming to my base, and so he needed a place to stay, and I needed a roommate. I'm like, oh, yeah, man, I got a spare bedroom. Come live with me. And so we lived together for a year, and we played so much World of Warcraft. But he was on casual status the whole time that he was there. And
Did they work him really hard?
Oh, Ben, like, so they used him as all of, like, the free, cheap labor. Like, it's like, oh, this is a free guy that I can assign to do stuff that I don't want my actual guys to have to do.
Like what?
Poor Mike. Mike got assigned to be the proctor of the urinalysis test for the entire year that he was there.
He had to watch people pee?
So in the military, we also there's a drug demand reduction program where we want to make sure that nobody's taking drugs. And so you are randomly called all the time to go give your pee to this special building. And they have to see it leave your body to make sure that you're not cheating the system. And so they need people to watch people pee all day. And that's what my buddy Mike did for the first year that he was in the Air Force, is he watched people pee.
He was the designated wee watcher.
And here's the thing, like, okay, so I love to razz him about this and asked him at every opportunity, like, tell me the best pee stories that you can. And Ben, he had one story that was so good that I swore to him that anytime that I told him, I'm going to tell this story and appropriate it as mine, but I'm going to credit it to you every time I tell it.
Awesome.
So this did not happen to me. This happened to Mike, but it was so hilarious. I asked him, like, what's the strangest thing or what's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you while you were pee watching? And he goes, okay, well, there was this one guy. He's like, this junior enlisted guy came in and had to give his pee. And we went to the bathroom and I had to watch over his shoulder and he undid his pants. And he said the kid had, like, he had equipment that was so large, like male anatomy that was so big that in the moment, Mike, who stares at male equipment all day, actually went, wow. And then, yeah, like gasped and said, wow. And the guy apparently, without missing a beat, like snapped his head to look at him and he goes, yeah.
I get that. I thought you were going to tell a stage fright story, which is a real thing. We need to move on. Okay, so in all of this apparatus, once you take people, you turn them into a military person, then you make them a technical specialist, then you need them to work. But the problem is, most of the time, we're not actually doing the thing we're called upon to do. It's like a firefighter. Like, hey, we hope that we never actually have to have things that are on fire. But if they were, we need you to be ready. So in order to get that way, we're going to take this pretend thing that isn't actually a building, and we're going to put a pretend fire in it, and you're going to put it out. And those are called exercises. So we have lots of exercises in the military where we're pretending to do the things that we're supposed to be called upon to do, so we show that we're ready. We try to make them as accurate as possible and do as many of the things that we're actually called upon as we can, but there's really no way to do a perfect exercise.
Well, and you were but we try to pretend. Like, everybody knows it's an exercise, and everybody pretends to the best of their ability that it's real world conditions, and we're gonna practice the way that we play, kind of thing. But exercises are so dumb because at the same time, you're also supposed to be doing like your normal job.
Yeah.
Like, you told a great story about how you had to go to urinalysis during an exercise and they had locked the building.
Right. And my career was at stake, but I also was supposed to be pretending that there was an active shooter in the area.
Yeah. So like, what do you do? Like, do I give pee or do I hide my car?
Yeah. Okay, so the thing about exercises, and my favorite example I like to give is you walk up to a junior airman and as an exercise evaluator, you're there to basically help them make believe. All right, I'm going to help all of you guys make believe that something bad is happening, and then we'll see how you react to it. So you walk up to an airman and you hand him a card that says, your building is on fire. And then you evaluate how good he plays make believe. All he has in his hand is a piece of paper that says your building is on fire on it.
There are two kinds of people that get that card. There's the person who's like, okay, hey, the building's on fire. Everybody, the building's on fire. We need to evacuate. Hey, make sure you're doing this. Make sure you do this. And then there's the other guy that's like, oh no, my stars and garters. The building is on fire. Everyone, the building is on fire. And then they just start screaming down the hallways.
And guess which one of those guys they love more in the exercise system?
Oh, they love guy number 2 because he's so fun.
I found, though, because I spent a good portion of my career being an exercise evaluator, that I could give a lot of grace to the guy who wasn't very good at being really alarmed at a piece of paper that says your building is on fire.
There was an exercise at a base that I was at once where I don't remember, like, they were pretending that this guy was trying to sneak onto the base. Like, this guy was simulating that he was a terrorist trying to sneak onto the base, and they did everything right. They arrested him. They like identified him as like, oh, well, you're a suspicious character, and they zip tied his hands, and they didn't have like a brig or a jail, and so they threw him in the nearest building, which was like the wing commander's building, like where all the leadership of the people live. And this guy who is pretending to be an insurgent is one of those, the building is on fire kind of guys. And so he's like, they put him in a room and they're expecting him to just like chill out because, oh, you've been captured. Haha, good job. No, he started like wriggling out of his like zip tie handcuffs that didn't put on tight enough. And then he like broke out of this broom closet that he was in. And so there's this guy pretending to be a terrorist on the base, and he like gets like a pen, and there's like an evaluator with a clipboard.
He pretended too hard.
Yeah, there was an evaluator with a clipboard walking around behind him. And Ben, he broke into the wing commander's staff meeting. And so, like, all of the big wigs and the highest-ranking people in the base are in this room.
That is awesome.
And he's in there, and he's, like, stabbing them, pretending to stab these people with this pen. And the evaluator's there like, you are dead, sir. You are dead, sir. You are dead, sir. And then after he killed, like, half of his group commanders, the wing commander goes, son, you need to get out of this room right now. And, like, just kicked both of them out.
Because the exercise is being conducted under the authority of that person.
Yes, and like I understand this is an exercise. You are taking this too far and are getting into my day.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want you to evaluate how good I am at pretending. I want you to evaluate how good they are at pretending. Yeah, so we do lots of exercises at every level. Sometimes it's very low level in a single work center. Sometimes you're evaluating an entire wing's ability to pretend like they're gathering up all their things and deploying to some remote location and operating from a remote location. And sometimes you're evaluating the entire ability of the whole system. We call that a tier 1 exercise, where you're seeing that we can pick up and move to another part of the world and have all of the pieces of all of the component services operate in unison in an orchestrated way to achieve national objectives.
If those are the days that you want to be on leave. Like, I want to have had vacation on the books for a long time before this happens.
Yeah. All right. So over the course of my career, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, I've had good leaders. I've mostly had good leaders, I'd say.
Oh, of course you would say.
That embrace the core values. There's been friendship and camaraderie. My bad experiences haven't been with people so much as they've been against the system. You know, the bureaucracy, the red tape. That's my bad experiences mostly.
My bad experiences are individuals that I honestly thought the world would be a better place if they were dead.
That's a possibility, Josh. Over the course of my career, I've had 5 of my friends die.
Wow, way to take it to a dark place.
Yeah, well,
thanks,
I want to talk about that for just a sec, because the world would be better if they weren't.
That's the opposite of what I said.
Charles Ransom, Major Charles Ransom, was a friend of mine. He happened to be in the conference room at the Kabul airport back in 2011 when one of our trusted Afghan nationals came into the room and started firing and killed 10 people. J.D. Loftus was my roommate at Army Combat Skills Training. He was part of the AFPAC Hands program. He spoke Dari and Pashto and was working for the good of the Afghan people. And he was shot by a trusted Afghan driver at close range. Luis Melendez-Sanchez, who you might have known from the 1st Comm Squadron at Langley Air Force Base, was deployed to Djibouti, Africa, and he was on a helicopter that was out over the ocean, and it crashed into another helicopter and crashed into the ocean, and he didn't make it out alive. Bo William Capella, who I told the story about in episode 9, he was the security force that was given his all in Italy protecting nuclear weapons. These people came into the United States Air Force, and while we don't frequently nowadays ask airmen to put their lives on the line and risk their lives to achieve national objectives like we used to do back in the World War II era, we still do, and we still expect the last full measure of devotion from people when it's called upon. I wish those people were still with us, but they aren't, and that is the risk. That is the cost of freedom. The lives of good men like those that I listed.
Man, I'll tell you, like my it's tough to follow up like a speech like that, because you're right. That's serious, and these people should be remembered, and they did give their lives for their country and their service. And as much as I'd hate to end the podcast on such a heavy note, like I would feel bad trying to be my witty, sarcastic self to try to lighten the mood. So I'm just not going to do that.
All right. Well, happy 75th birthday, United States Air Force. As they tend to say, we have the greatest military force the world has ever known. I'm not going to argue with that. I think that despite all of our imperfections and inefficiencies. It is an efficient combat force, and as long as it's working for a benevolent government trying to do the right things, I think it's a force for good in the world. Which is why I continue to belong to it and try to contribute.
If you took a leaner force and gave them the resources that we give to our forces, they would do amazing things. I can't imagine what the RAF would do with the Air Force's budget.
Yeah. Well, their force is 5% the size of ours.
Yeah, and so every one of those people is probably pulling their weight and then some.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, happy birthday, United States Air Force.
Not unhappy birthday, United States Air Force. Stop it.
All right, so if you heard something that we talked about today and you'd like to join in on the discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. I'll put up the photos that we talked about, Josh's daughter's essay, which is fantastic, and some stuff about the Air Force as well, the things that we talked about. And if you'd like to join in the discussion anonymously, you can go to our subreddit on reddit.r/badatmagic, and we'd love to hear from you.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you really want to show some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. Like, we'll just take the stars. You don't even have to type anything out. And if you want me and Ben to share stupid anecdotes of the times that we were in the military and were doing stupid military things from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page. And thank you to everyone who already is.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.